Hey, I am Amy Summers. I am a consultant for 503As and 503Bs, and it's really just my mission to keep everyone in business and compliant and making quality preparations. And so that's my passion. I have a background in running some of these types of facilities, 503As, 503B as well. But now I just focus fully on consulting. So thanks for having me today, Vivian.
Hi, Vivian. My name's Neal Higgins. I've been in the pharma industry about 27 or 28 years, retired from Eli Lilly and Company in 2018. And after that time, I moved on to West Pharmaceutical Services. And I spent a lot of my time helping customers with selection of container closure systems and aseptic processing techniques and equipment. So that's my background. I have a 3 decades in big pharma, and just interested in helping some of the smaller companies with some of the knowledge I've gained and help them meet their goals.
Excellent. So we're here today because you guys have published an article. It's a 2-piece article, right? And I'm going to read the name because I'll never get it straight. It is how to produce a well-closed vial in a regulated cGMP environment. And this is in the International Journal of Compounding. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what prompted you to write this?
If I can chime in here, Neal, I would say the most important piece of why we did it was because when you're compounding a sterile preparation and you're packaging it into a vial, let's say, your container closure integrity has to be intact. Otherwise, it's considered adulterated by the FDA. And for this reason, all types of compounders, whether you're a 503A, a 503B, a hospital, whoever you are, you have to be able to produce a well-closed vial. And then specifically with this article, we end up focusing a little bit on that guidance document that you referenced, the current good manufacturing practice guidance for 503Bs. And it's not finalized yet, but it basically impacts 503Bs trying to be compliant. So we thought it'd be helpful to educate those facilities that are impacted by this guidance document.
What brought you guys to get together?
So since I work at West Pharmaceutical Services, our customers are very broad, from smallest biotech startups, compounding pharmacies, all the way up to big pharma. And in my day-to-day job of helping customers, I do get a lot of jobs from compounding pharmacies, and they have a lot of questions about process-related questions about selecting the right container closure system for their drug products, and not having much experience at all in the compounding pharmacy industry. We wanted to make sure that we were representing our customers appropriately. So we went out into the industry. We found Amy, who has a very broad experience base with compounding pharmacies and those regulatory requirements that they're faced with. And so we started working with her to just better help us understand the industry and how we can help our customers. So that's how we came together. And so then we started talking about the needs that are out there. We wrote the article, and continuing to look for ways to support and help those people in the industry.
Okay, excellent. In your article, you talk about the proposed FDA guidance for the industry on the current good manufacturing practice, the guide for human compounding outsourcing facilities under Section 503B of the FDA and C Act. Why did you think it's important to discuss the proposed guidance in your article?
Yeah, I'll take that one. I would say 503Bs, they are expected to meet cGMP. There was a rumor going around a few years ago that it was sort of a cGMP light for 503Bs, but really it's pretty close to what drug manufacturers have to go through. So even before this guidance becomes final, the outsourcing facilities that are looking to achieve or maintain their 503B status in good standing with the FDA, they're going to need to adopt these strategies to make specific actions to comply with the FDA recommendations. And so specifically 503Bs, they need to focus on qualifying their aseptic processes, especially the ones that are critical to creating and maintaining a sterile injectable drug product. And especially it needs to meet those quality attributes throughout the shelf life. So I would say that those without the necessary infrastructure, equipment, processes, and personnel, they're the ones that are likely to face regulatory challenges from the agency as well as state boards of pharmacy.
Okay, great. What is it about qualifying an aseptic process that makes it difficult to understand or execute?
Yes, I'll take that one. So I do a lot of work with voice of the customer, and I listen to what people say, and I try to understand what their needs are. And one thing we hear clearly is when we talk to our customers, and some of our survey results we've done, is they have this overwhelming desire to do the right thing. Sure, we have no problem doing these things, but what exactly does qualification mean? And so we look at the FDA guidance, and there's no real specific place to go and find information about qualification. It's used somewhat ambiguously in the some of the documents that you read, and even in the proposed guidance for the 503 guidance that we're talking about, there is a section on process qualification, and even the sections it references doesn't really go into detail on what the expectations are. So we get a lot of questions about, is there a checklist? Is there a form? Is there a specific guidance that we have to meet? And the answer is no, there's really not. It's the FDA really wants you to do a risk-based analysis of your process and develop a program of qualification based on the actual risk that you can identify. But they do, if you keep looking further at some of their publications, you will find they make really good references to the International Society of Pharmaceutical Engineering and the ISPE, and they do document some articles and some guidance from that organization that they say these are best practices. And we talk about those guidance in those articles in the article that we wrote for the Compounding Journal. So in the specification part, where it talks about specifications and supplier provided C of A's, and ready to use components versus unsterilized components, and what advantages those might have from a compounding pharmacy.
If you're,
can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I've been on both sides, where we started out trying to wash and sterilize our own vials, and then also be compounders. And then just realize, maybe we should do what we do best and just stick to compounding.
Yep. And validating a clean, sterile process is not always easy.
Yes, and who knew? We would be dealing with particulate problems and think, what the heck is going on? And really, whenever we just said, let experts do their washing and sterilization and packaging, and then it would be a lot better. And I would just say, working with a company like West to have those kinds of products shipped to your door is just way easier, and it's really not that much more expensive, if any, if you actually look at all of the expenses you have if you're actually trying to undertake doing your own process of just processing your vials to make them ready for compounding. Oh man, I would just sub it out to the experts and do what you do best.
At some point, when you start scaling up and you're starting to do hundreds of thousands of components, then it might be cost effective to validate a sterilization process. But you have to do the math and understand what the business expenses are of going both ways. Because the sterile components are more expensive, but they're a better value proposition for quite a few companies.
Okay, great. In the article, you spend a lot of time talking about the capping process. What is it about the capping process that makes it such an important topic?
Yeah, I think this is the last step of the aseptic process. And I would say that it is often overlooked and not necessarily well understood by everyone. And in the same industry survey that we mentioned earlier, we found that there's basically a wide variety of different types of cappers that compounding facilities use. And if you look at the data in our article, you'll see that almost a quarter of compounding pharmacies that we surveyed, they basically use these hand crimpers. I don't know if you know them, Vivian, but those in the industry, they know, you just, you crimp it by hand with this little tool. And then, a good portion also, about 14%, they have some kind of automatic cappers used as well. But if you think about it, going back to the hand crimper folks, if you're using a hand crimper to close and seal your vial, which you're probably doing if you're a 503A, or I don't know if a hospital is really doing this, but if you accidentally apply too much force, you can end up with, let's say, glass breakage, or the stopper bulging, or things like that. But on the other side of it, if you're just kind of gingerly doing it softly and it's too little force, then you could end up with like a loose cap, or you lose the seal integrity. So you basically have to figure out a way to standardize and qualify your process, because you're depending on it to work for you consistently. So it's really important.
I want to interject here a little bit, because we've been talking a lot about 503As, and as we had previously discussed, this is applicable to 503. No, we've been talking a lot about 503Bs, but you just mentioned also the 503As doing this. I don't know if you want to talk about a little bit about the 503As. Again, I know there's a lot of discussion about them trying to become more cGMP like, and they're going to say, well, we're US, we have to abide by USP. So why is this relevant to me?
Well, it's all about patient safety, right? Mm-hmm. So I think everyone has the same goal of making sure that whatever it is that they produce, that is going to be sterile and keep sterile throughout the whole shelf life. And so if you can imagine, if it goes out of your pharmacy, let's say your 503A pharmacy, and maybe you were the one that just kind of did a little bit too soft, and it really didn't have that integrity that we're looking for, imagine what the repercussion could be. So cGMP, USP, whatever it is that your standard you're trying to meet, it's really the end goal is patient safety. Wouldn't you say so, Neal?
I would say that's exactly the goal.
Yeah.
And, the hand crimpers are great. They do a good job generally, but, even as simple as they are, they're not very well understood. There's several companies that make hand crimpers. Some of them have adjustments you can make, and some of them don't. Mm-hmm. And if you don't really understand how to make those adjustments and when, can cause problems. Like Amy said, there's consistency issues even within operator. But once you start getting 2 or 3 operators using the same crimper at the same setting, you're going to have broad differences in hand strength and dexterity of those operators. So it can be a very challenging thing to qualify something that has no machine settings that's repeatable. And it's a very difficult thing to proceduralize. And it's a very difficult thing to follow a procedure with different abilities of different operators. So they can be a challenge. And we do get a lot of calls about that. Well, examples of calls I might get are, hey, we bought this hand crimper online. It had a 4-star rating, but we're having capping problems. So we think we need a different cap. We don't think it's the crimper because it had a 4-star rating. And, those are difficult conversations to have sometimes. There has to be a little bit more thought put into a aseptic process that has, impact the patient safety on it. And so those kind of things are challenging. And some companies do a very good job with it, but there is risk. And that's why when we talk about the FDA, they said, you need to take a risk-based approach. And that's exactly what they mean by a risk-based approach. What's the risk? How are you going to mitigate those risks? And how are you going to document it? And how are you going to repeat it? And what in-process controls are you going to place to make sure that you're producing a consistent product? And those are some of the challenges.
Okay, great. You kind of started into my next question, which is also, what other questions are you getting from people? What are the questions that, specifically, other questions you get specifically about the capping process?
How do you know when you have a good cap? So the cap, the seal looks fine, but it seems to be loose. It turns easily. The seal is collapsed on the sidewall. What does that mean? So one of the things about a qualified process is understanding the defects and what they mean. And so sometimes you might have to create a defect library so you can train your operators what a specific defect is and what might the potential root cause be. So the adjustments can be made in the right amount of time. So that's one example. Another example is when you put a cap on a vial, you can no longer see the stopper vial interface. So you don't know what's really going on under there. So once you put the seal on, that is blocked from your view, and it becomes ambiguous. You don't know how much compression you have on the rubber. Is it enough? Is it too much? Because you just can't see it. So, sometimes we talk about techniques of inspection, whether it be, there's one method called residual seal force, and that's the primary test that's used in the market to understand how much residual force it remains on the rubber after the capping process has been done. But then you can get really sophisticated and you can start doing some X-ray technology where you can take an X-ray of the vial and then you could actually see the rubber and the glass interface and how that rubber has formed itself around the glass. And, you can actually do a CT scan where you can look for pores or gaps or leaks between those two surfaces. So capping can be a very sophisticated thing. And that's why I say sometimes it's overlooked on how technical it can be, and people get tripped up. And I also get calls like, hey, we just spent a whole lot of money on an automatic capper machine. We shouldn't be having capping problems, right? Why are we having capping problems? Can you send us a different stopper? And no, there's some work that needs to happen in this whole qualification process to understand the capper settings and how those capper settings interact with a particular container closure system. So we get companies saying, hey, I'm using this ISO 5 mil vial with this stopper and seal, and it works fine. But when I use this ISO 5 vial from another glass manufacturer, we get bad seals. So we don't understand. So even though they're both ISO 5 vials, there might be dimensional variation in those vials that still make them within the ISO standard, but can be enough to cause you capping issues, seal quality issues that you need to better understand. And so those are the kind of calls that I get. Those are the kind of things I help people with.
Okay, excellent. I'm just curious. I mean, it seems like a great product. What other stuff does West Pharmaceuticals offer?
Well, from a technical service standpoint, we have a very strong technical service team, and these folks are assigned to different customers. As customers come on board, they'll get assigned a customer service representative. The customer service representative, they have a lot of expertise in product compatibility. They have a good idea of what type of rubber might fit with the type of product you're using. They can do an amazing job of doing your mathematical calculation to make sure that the glass vial you're using, the rubber stopper that you're choosing, and the what aluminum seal is the correct aluminum seal to make the correct stack up for your vial so you can achieve a good seal. So they do lots of things like that from a technical service standpoint just to get you started. And then after that, of course, we have our analytical lab where we can do all the CCI testing you need or any other analysis of your container closure system that you might need to just better understand what kind of product you're producing. Also, at West, we're very different than most suppliers. We actually have a dedicated fill finish team that is people like me that have decades of industry experience in all kinds of fill finish applications that we've brought together. We have our own filling suites, we have our own filling machines and capping machines, and we help customers develop recipes and parameters for their process, using their components and their drug products even. So we're a full service organization. And that's one of the reasons I came to work for West, is because when I see the science they're doing and the level of support they've given me over the last 20 years, it was a good fit. And I understand what they're doing, and it far exceeds all the other suppliers that I've dealt with in the past. So I had a real good feeling about what they were doing.
West provides awesome products, awesome containers and closures, and several varieties, and lots of things I didn't even realize that they provided. I was just looking at one of their videos, something not related to vials, but they have all sorts of containers and closures, and they're ready to go, and they're packaged well, and you don't have to worry about it as the compounding pharmacy or 503B outsourcing facility that you are. And then I would say that it's also really nice that they have their specification set. C of A's or CFCs come with their products, and that's really important that you maintain those specifications. What you need to define what it is that you need. And basically, if you want to make a change to a component, you really need to have those specifications set. And I don't know why I'm like kind of on this tangent here, but it's really nice when you can have a product that has its certificate with it, and then you can go against what your own specifications are. And, as Neal mentioned, some of the smallest little differences in the dimensions, that can really make or break your integrity at the end and cause a failure if you don't have those specifications set and really defined. Those ranges might seem small, but really even just the smallest difference can make everything. So I know I'm just kind of on a tangent there, but I think it's just another reason to have your component specs really ironed out, and then working with the right supplier like West, who has all of this buttoned up really.
Well, I think that ties into actually a theme that we covered earlier this year, which is about partnering with your suppliers. We called it for growth, and I think this also ties into what we were saying earlier in terms of at what point do you outsource and what point do you do it yourself? And at some point you have to make the business decision of where your resources are better utilized. And so if it has to do with, working with a supplier who has all the specs and everything is going to be exactly the same every single time, rather than you trying to figure it out, it seems like that's what you're saying. It makes more sense, just to find the right partner who can minimize your work and your risk. And that means you do, like you said before, doing kind of your core competency, which is the actual compounding.
Right. And even for those who are looking to make sure the costs are contained, do that cost benefit analysis and include all the risks that you'd be undertaking if you're going to do things like vial washing and sterilization yourself. It's just too risky, I think, if you're not properly set up with your facilities and procedures. And I mean, that's a whole other animal.
Right. All right. Excellent. I think that's a good note. Yes.
All right. Yep. I like it.
So if anybody has any questions, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Oh, that's a good question, and one I wasn't ready for.
I know. I thought, we've been talking about all this stuff, and so, but what if people want to find out more about the capping or have questions about their own issues?
So my email address is d.neal.higgins@westpharma.com.